now because I always forget. All right, so I am recording now. So I will take this and upload it to the Google Plus community when we're done. I also would love, we're going to talk about conferring with readers. So I want you to even be thinking as we go through the whole time together today, how could you share either your successes or your struggles with conferring with kids? And that could be reading or writing. We're going to talk a lot about reading conferring today, but this could also extend to writing. But I would love for you to share in that Google Plus community something you've tried that worked really well with conferring, a way that you schedule your conferences, anything, just maybe between now and then we will offer one more Zoom session. Sorry, decline that. One more Zoom session before the end of the year, and hopefully we can reflect on some things that you guys have added to the Google Plus community. All right, hopefully everybody's had a chance to log in with my talking, and I cannot hear you. This is someone over at McWhorter. As far as I know, everybody else can, so it's probably on your end. Francisco, it looks like maybe you want to make sure and check your microphone. You should have over to the left a little mic. Can all of you still hear me? Wave at me if you can hear me. Okay, yeah. So Francisco, I don't know how to help you with that. It's probably from your end. Sorry. Alrighty, let's get going. Conferring with readers. Give me just a second. I got to make it switch the screen. There it is. All right, so our goals today are this. We're going to talk about what is conferring. Why should we confer? We're going to talk a little bit about making the commitment to confer. I actually was listening to a podcast this morning that gave me a perfect, well, sort of a perfect analogy, a story to share with you that I want to share. We're going to talk about a practical map for the conferring process that comes from this book here. Let me get my pointer. From this book here, To Know and Nurture a Reader, Conferring with Confidence and Joy. I know for many of us, this is kind of an art that takes lots of practice. And we will talk a little bit about behind the scenes moves for conferring. All right, let's keep going. So what is conferring? So I want you just as a group or as each classroom or campus, will you respond in the comments, what is conferring to you? So talk to your friends that are there with you and decide what would you say that conferring is, and go ahead and respond in the comments. There we go. What is conferring in your book, in your mind? I need everyone on the chat box.
Questions, yes, about what they like, but also comprehension questions. How much they understand.
Alrighty, some definitions are coming up. So after you've typed yours in, just kind of scan through the chat. A more intimate, I like that word, discussion for setting goals and recognizing growth. So Gray's kind of coming in with the same thing, thinking about it as an opportunity to set goals. Smith. They're slowly popping up. Meeting with students on their level to help bridge the gap. I like that word, Glenn and Kaysen, that you guys added about getting insight. I think the definition we're going to look at in just a minute really touches on that as well. Okay, so let me get back over here. Here is from this book that we're going to be taking a lot of things from today. Here is how they define what conferring is. Now I realize that's kind of a long paragraph, but it was just too good. I couldn't just pull out little pieces of it. So why don't you read that to yourself? And then in just a couple of minutes, I would love for someone just to kind of speak up and share something that stands out or kind of resonates with you when you read that definition. Remember to unmute yourself when you're ready to share.
Do I need to say my name too?
Sure, that's helpful.
Yeah, sorry. This is Dina Middleton from Sebring Elementary.
Yes.
What I think just automatically pulls up or comes up in my mind when I'm reading it is to pull up alongside. Especially when we're conferring, I feel like I try not to pull them to my table to talk. I really try to meet them where they are at.
Wow, I love that. I think that's a great point. You know, as I was reading through this the last couple of days and again today, that I had to play a lot in my mind. And as I'm thinking about moving forward next year with our new TEKs and looking at what workshop model teaching looks like, especially in K and 1, we do a lot of pulling them in small groups. I think a lot more sometimes than some of the older grades do. And so I like your point of what it means to actually for you to go to them. I think that's really pretty huge when we look at it defined this way. Somebody else, what else stands out to you?
Hi.
Hello.
Hey. I would say one of the things that stood out to me, I mean, we conference all the time, but something that stands out to me is when they say to give your wholehearted and undivided attention.
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes we'll want to knock out too many things at once, or we'll want to try to grab almost like a small group instead of giving that wholehearted and undivided attention.
And one thing that stood out to me was kind of the end in mind with their independency. How we want that to really just set that up during that conferring piece.
Yeah, I like the way I kind of highlighted or tried to bold the start of each sentence that they created, that simply it's this, when it's the best, it's this, but ultimately, and that connects to that, what are we actually trying to make? And I think you guys probably don't feel it as much as some of the upper grades do, but we're really looking for that agency, their independence, and the joyfulness in reading, and that it's not, we actually do this thing called reading outside of school. It doesn't have to happen just here.
Yeah.
All right. Anyone else have something they want to share that stood out to them? All right. I'm going to keep moving. Please take this definition and notice that they did break it down into simplest at its best, and then ultimately, because where you are with your conferring, you may not be at that ultimate purpose of it. You may still be doing what is simple. Can I just at least pull up beside a kiddo and talk to them about what's going on? Matter of fact, the authors of the book, Yates and Nozak, talk a lot throughout the book about this being an ongoing process, and that conferring is definitely an art as a teacher that takes time. All right, so here are just a couple of things I just want to kind of point out that I pulled from their book. Sorry, I meant for that to come in one at a time. But first of all, conferring is when we meet them where they are, just like you guys said. And I like that they point this out. Meet them where they are physically, actually going to them. Academically, sorry, hold on, let me decline this phone call real quick. Well, I can't mute it. It's just going to keep ringing. I apologize. Okay. Meeting them where they are academically, even your little friends that may not be reading in it yet, even if you've got some friends that are still down in pre-A, hopefully, cross my fingers, hopefully you don't have very many friends left there yet, or still. If you do still have friends down in that area, they're really not ready for text yet in that emergent level, it's probably time to go ahead and take them through to your PST and just begin to brainstorm, what are some other things we can do? Are there other things going on? Definitely there are probably kiddos who need to have the dyslexia screener filled out at the end of the year as we get there. But really, this is about meeting them where they are. So if I have a friend who's really not there yet, we may just confer and talk about letters. We may still be conferring and letting him talk to me about how books work. So, and then emotionally, this is one that I think we don't consider a lot. I'm really looking forward to a lot of our new resources pull in social emotional skills into reading and connected with reading. But really thinking about when you sit down with your friends, where they are emotionally can impact the whole discussion, the whole conversation. And some days it may be more dealing with this than you're ever able to get to this. So when I thought about conferring, I pulled these thoughts out of the book that when you're conferring, you're using keen observation. thoughtful inquiry, and attuned listening. So someone or just kind of speak up. What does keen observation mean to you? Don't forget to unmute yourself. What is keen observation? Don't be afraid.
Hi. We just talked about, we think that that's just being very aware of every single thing that they're doing, all of their reading behaviors, writing behaviors, but just being very observant of that, and also recording it so that we can remember, what they're doing.
Definitely. Anybody else have thoughts on that keen observation?
I will agree with that definition. I will just to be very analytical and try to be very objective in what you observe so you can make valid conclusions of what you are observing.
I so agree. I know one term, as I was reading in another book, From Striving to Thriving, she talks about, Stephanie Harvey is the author of that book, and she talks about kid watching. And this is not something we do just in that conference time. I think it's something that we have to be doing all the time, and especially as your years in teaching progress, this is something that you tend to get better at. So those of you who are still in that first year, hang tight. You will get better at noticing and picking up just the little bits and pieces that make up who your kids are as readers. So it's not just about their skills, it's knowing them as a reader. Thoughtful inquiry, asking questions. This one right here, I don't know if you're like me, listening. I think a lot of times we sit in on a conversation and we go to a kiddo with what we want them to do or what we want them to set goals on, and we start talking right away. And Zach and Yates talk a lot about that first part of your conference is all about listening. It's asking questions. It's trying to get to know them and where they are in that moment versus coming in with, oh, I know this kid is not doing great with using picture cues, or I know he really gets stuck in only choosing nonfiction text, or vice versa, or literary text. So really that first part of the conversation is all about listening. Another thing that conferencing is honoring self-selected choices. Hopefully you've seen some resources this year in the curricular resources that are helping you to start to build and help your kids make good choices. They're still young, and this is still a process in work. But with our new TEKS, there is a strand that is specifically, well, there's a substrand, I should say. There's foundational skills, and under the foundational skills, there is a substrand called self-sustained reading. So not just self-selected, but self-sustained, meaning over a period of time, even kindergartners, the kindergarten SE actually reads like this. It says let me go back. The student reads grade level text with fluency and comprehension. The student is expected to self-select and interact independently with text for increasing periods of time. And that is an essay that we haven't actually had before. So recognizing and encouraging their preferences is going to be even bigger than it has been. Again, this is with getting to know our kids. Conferring is about celebrating growth and building on strengths. I love many of you really brought that up when you listed what it was. You talked about not only identifying what are they struggling with, but building on those strengths. It's about teasing out challenges. Sometimes we have to kind of work through the discussion with the kiddos or just sit and watch to figure what are they really having a challenge with. It's about nudging readers forward, using unique steps designed just for them. To me, conferring is the ultimate in differentiation because it's your chance to meet just with them and problem solve with them. All right, let's keep going. All right, so here's another quote that I pulled from the book, and I'm trying to not do the work for you. It's another big thing right now on my heart is letting our students do the thinking. Because you are students today who can read this quote to yourself. And then I'd love you to respond by typing in, what does this say to you about conferring? So I'm going to be quiet for a minute and let you respond. So once you've read, just respond with this in mind.
We're ready.
What does it say about the process of conferring?
Can you hear me?
Go
Yes.
ahead.
Can you guys hear me?
I'm hearing people say they're ready.
Oh, okay. This
That's
is
okay.
Haley Jackson from
Yeah.
Seaburn. I think to me, this just means that there's really no one way to conference with a child. I know that I was constantly like asking my mentor and the other girls on my team, like, how do I do this? Like, what am I supposed to be asking? And it's not really anything that you can follow. You can't follow a script when you're conferring, because what you talk about with one student is going to be completely different and on a completely different level with another student. So you just you have to use, and it's tough your first year because you're not really sure what questions to ask. But I can tell it's something that with time and as I get better at the profession, I'll learn what questions to ask and how to go about like helping that student.
Definitely. Anybody else? What are your thoughts? I'm reading some of you down here.
Over here at Smith. Can you hear us?
Yes, go for it.
Okay, yeah. Just to tag along with what they said, there's no one way to do it. Like, you can't come to the classroom and say, okay, so this is how I need to do it. It's just all about the relationship you have with students and knowing them individually. Because in your own class, you're not going to confer with each student the same way. So just knowing them individually, I think that really helps confer. I think it helps to go smooth because it's not something that formal. It's something that, rather informal. And once the conversation starts, I think they'll become more comfortable with expressing their goals to you. Also, with recognizing some of their weaknesses. So at first, they want you to tell them what they need to work on. Hopefully, you get comfortable. They'll get comfortable. They'll say, this is what I feel I need to work on. I feel like this where we can get the kindred and maybe feel like putting people on time.
I agree. And I'm going to apologize because you're a little far from the mic, so I'm trying to pick up on most of what you were saying. So Smith friends who are kind of out in the room as you speak up really loud. Even as if you're yelling at us, that's totally fine. But yeah, I picked up on that individuality of meeting them exactly where they are. I think that ties into several of things that some of you have said about it being a meaningful conversation. It builds relationships. I saw comments about speaking to the heart of that attuned listening. This is, like I said, the ultimate in differentiation. One thing that kind of stood out to me as far as this particular quote, I like that it, of course, as the person who's trying to write curriculum and provide you guys with resources, it says, it doesn't unfold by following a script, a checklist, or a curriculum resource. There are things that I'm going to share with you that this particular book has a few tools that can be helpful. But again, this is one of those things where it's going to take your teacher craft. What I would love to hear from a couple of you, just really quickly, if you don't mind, is what are some things you do to build your teacher craft? To help you know what to say and when to say it and those kind of things when you're conferring, whether it's here or whether you're in a guided reading group. What are some things you guys do to help build your teacher craft? Just speak up however you want.
Okay, we'll share. We use prompting guides. At least we used to use prompting guides. We would keep them right there on our table. So if it was for guided reading or writer's workshop or whatever, we would have kind of like thinking stems for ourselves right there on the table, so that if we got to a spot and a student was struggling with something specifically, we could just look to our prompting guide. Now it comes kind of natural for us, but even what we'll do now is if her or I have a struggling student that we know we have a similar situation, we'll actually go in and just watch each other, conference with them to see how they kind of react to certain things or guide them along so that we can, take that as advice in our own room.
Or we even discuss that as part of our PLC planning, what we're doing with our struggling ones and what kind of questions we're asking to kind of help those strugglers. So.
I think that's great. I love that idea of going in to watch each other. How do you manage that? Like if you're going to go in and watch Glenn, what happens with your kiddos when they're in the room?
We just ask our kindergarten aide to
Okay.
cover my class
To kind of
for
cover for you.
whatever amount of time we need.
And it's usually no more than like
5-10.
Yeah, 5-10, no more than 15 at the max.
Yeah.
Okay. Somebody else share, how do you kind of help develop and grow your craft with conferring or learning how and what to say? What have you been doing to kind of try to improve that? Anybody?
Right now I'm being coached by Engage to Learn. And so we came up with a list of skills according to their level. And so during self-selected reading, I gave them the choice. Like I noticed, I'm sorry.
That's okay. It happens on all of our campuses.
Please call the office immediately. Thank you.
So it might be, I noticed you're not paying attention to the endings or you are not using the picture. And I give them like 3 skills that I noticed that they're struggling. And then they're deciding what they're going to work on to get better. And I highlight. And then during my conferences, during self-selected reading or guided reading, I make notes. And I tell them, I thought you were working on this, or no, I still don't see evidence that you're working on this strategy. And so it's been, it's taken a long time for them to decide what they want to improve. But if I want them to take ownership, then I need to give them the choice. What are they going to work on?
True. So true. So yeah, that knowing kiddos and just even studying them and watching them sometimes will help growing your knowledge about them can be important. Okay, I'm going to keep us moving. So we're going to come back over to our slides. So here, the next question is, so if we know what conferring is, why should we confer? And a lot of you have already started to share ideas that connect to this. These were some that the book specifically points out, and these were, I kind of pulled these out. They had a different list, but this was what I pulled out. We should confer because conferring blank. Conferring bridges the classroom and the world outside of the classroom together. It helps students reflect on their reading habits and set goals. A lot of that we've already talked about. I want to stop for just a second. As we talk about helping our kids set goals, I was reading another part from Striving to Thriving, a book by Stephanie Harvey. And in there, as they're talking about being kid watchers, there's a particular study a teacher does with one student, and she talks about how she had always taken reading records or running records with her kids, and she was really good at pointing out what the kiddo wasn't good at. And she said that the one time she sat down with this particular little boy to ask him, sorry, something came up on my phone, to ask him, like, what, how's it going? And he didn't really want to respond to her because he knew the things that he was trying weren't successful and he wasn't recognizing what he did do well. So he was just in a point of fear of moving forward. And she said that she began to quit focusing on what he couldn't do and used her running record to notice what he could do. And she just spent some time just really noticing and complimenting and conferring and talking about what he could do, his good habits, before they began to set goals with where he was struggling at. So again, and I know we talked a little bit about that, but it just was kind of a good reminder for me that we have to spend a lot of times, especially with our youngest readers, noticing what they do well. All right, so why should we confer? Because conferring provides a window to explore and understand a child's learning world, and because conferring uncovers the kind of practical information that formal assessments do not. Okay, so somebody share, what is this last point addressing here? Uncovers the kind of practical information that formal assessments do not. And I'm going to get picky. I may start calling on campuses here. So one of my gray friends, I see you, Lexi. Can you share, what do you think, what kind of information can we gain from a conference that we wouldn't gain from your DRA? Or from your literacy battery? You're muted, so I'm going to unmute you.
Oh,
there you go. I can hear you now.
There we go. Okay. I mean, usually we do like the formal testing where it's, and so that's more like a one-on-one, and like it's based on, I guess, what I don't know how to word it. Like, I think with
uncovers the kind of
You're on the right track.
I think with formal assessments, like, especially with us being in kindergarten, our kids are so young, like, I think they kind of, like, they don't really fully understand what we're trying to know, like what we're trying to see. And so when we talk to them on a more individualized basis, and something that is more personal to them, they're more open with sharing the information that they do know, versus when we have this piece of paper in front of them and we're just telling them to just spit out all the information. They're not really getting a chance to talk with us. And I think our kids need the chance to talk more to be able to get to that information.
I would agree. So if I'm hearing you right, and I'm trying to make sure I can hear, you're touching on that fact that formal assessments, especially in kinder, can be sometimes intimidating. Whereas that conference, especially if you've built that relationship, it's all good. I knew what you meant. If we've built that relationship, it gives us that chance to kind of take down that barrier and really get to know them. And goodness, I think it's just that chance to make reading real life. What else can we uncover through conversing and talking and listening to our kiddos that we might not uncover in something more formal? Somebody else share. One more person.
We'll share. Something I think is interesting is when I think that they're doing fine, like let's say with a certain genre of book or a certain level of book, and they tell me that they think it's hard, but I've done a running record and they're great, and that's the appropriate instructional level. I always find it interesting when they tell me like, oh, that book was really hard. I'm like, oh, okay, that's really interesting, because it was actually just right for, I know it was just right for them. But I just like to kind of get feedback on a very uninstructional kind of feedback from them, just on how they're feeling about their reading, rather than what I know to be their appropriate level or strategy usage or whatever.
Yeah. Isn't that huge? You said their feelings on reading. Because goodness, if we start them off wrong in kinder with feelings or perceptions that aren't accurate even of themselves, that can have a huge impact later. All right, we're going to keep on moving because I don't want to have you here till 5. So once we kind of know what it is and why we should confer, Nozak and Yates talk a lot about making the commitment. And it was funny, I was listening to a podcast just this morning, and so it made me think of what I call the story of the man in the dirty suit. So if you'll just kind of hang with me for a second, I'm going to leave this screen here to share with you a story. So I was listening to this podcast this morning. It was actually about parenting, but anyways, they were interviewing a man named Darren Kinder, and he is a Secret Service agent who was in the towers on 9/11. And he goes through to talk about how as soon as he heard the first plane hit, or the first time he knew something was going on, his people were moved out into the lobby. And as he gets out into the lobby, he sees all the first responders coming in and out of the stairwell. And of course, they're telling everybody to go out. And he's like, well, I have a little bit of training. I'm going to go on in. So he goes in and comes across a lady who cannot make it down the stairs. And so he sends his 2 buddies on up, and he helps one lady out. And he said, without even thinking, he went just right back in to find out who else could he help. And found another lady, came on out. By this time, workers were trying more and more to get everybody out. So there was a payphone in the lobby. So he stopped to call his wife and let her know he was okay. And 15 minutes go by. By this time, he's hung up the phone. He's walked out of the building, and he's going to some of the first responders to ask if he can help. And he hears the second plane hit and just starts running. And he runs. He sees a fire truck that he thinks he's going to slide under, and he makes a decision not to. And then he sees this food cart he's going to run and hide behind, and decides not to. And he just keeps running. Long story short, the building collapses. He talks about hearing it all, and he's covered in dirt. Dirt fills his mouth, all the stuff from the cement. He can't see, can't breathe. It kind of starts to settle, and he can see a light down at the end. And he's thinking, okay, I'm going to go to the light. He changes his mind, and he stands there and just starts saying, follow my voice, follow my voice. And people start following his voice, and he points all these people to the light. And after a little while, he turns around and can't see the light anymore because he's sent so many people that way that it's clouding his way. So he starts to try to find his way again, turns out he ends up right back in the same place, like at the same intersection where he was first asking the responders what he needed to do before the collapse. And I think by this time, the second building has already collapsed, and he ends up in the same spot. Long story short, he runs into 4 other coworkers, and they're standing around. They're covered in dirt. They're like, what do we do now? So instead of stopping, even though they're worn out and dirty, they look around and they notice that there's a fire truck sitting there, but no first responders because so many of them were in the buildings. So they decide, one guy says, well, why don't we pick up the hoses and start trying to put out fires? And he's like, I don't know enough about putting out fires or how to work the fire hose. Why should I do that? They end up picking it up. They start putting out fires, and they work and work until more trained first responders come and kind of take over. They get them to stop, and Darren is shipped off to several miles away to where the rest of his Secret Service team was. And this is the part that stood with me. He walks into this room, and there's all these other Secret Service agents and people in his department, and there's a good handful of them that he notices are just clean. Their hair's still fixed, their clothes are all nice, and they look at him and they're like, where have you been? Like, what have you been doing? And he talks about having this frustration. He was so angry with them because they were all nice and clean, and they wanted to know why he was filthy, and he was filthy because he had been trying to do that dirty work. Even when it got hard, he ran back and he kept trying. Story sticks with me for many reasons. One has to do with my faith, and I won't dive into that, but what it really makes me think of from the teaching perspective is there are things that we are asked to do that are just flat hard. And that sometimes we try it and we're not successful. And so sometimes we throw in the towel and we quit. And what I appreciate about Darren is in the midst of tragedy and of some really different things and trying to save his own life, he kept going. And I think while the stories don't align perfectly, that is what stuck with me when I thought about making a commitment, especially with this idea of conferring and differentiation and really making strides to help our kids become readers and not test takers, or help them become thinkers and not just students, at school, that we have to make a commitment to stick with this every day. In the Know and Nurture Reader book, these are the 3 that they pull out. They say that if we're going to make a commitment, we make a commitment that conferring is conferring to learn. It's not first we learn only so that we can later teach. So the first step in making this commitment is to commit to learning about our kids so that we can teach them. The next commitment is to confer with tenacity. Every day, as much as possible, say no to distractions and resist the urge to quit. Just like the gentleman in the story had all of these crazy, huge distractions and moments to turn around and quit, he didn't. This, I think, conferring, especially with young readers who aren't quite there, and sometimes they can't hold much of a discussion with us, can be difficult, but there are things that they have to say, and I think that's important, and I don't think we can give up. Lastly, confer with the heart. Make the practice your own. While we can each give suggestions and share about what works in our classroom, you do have to make it your own while utilizing best practice instruction, using prompts that start with prompts that come from professionals, from people who have researched and who have spent a little more time in the field than maybe you or I have. And then you can build around that. Study to grow your own content knowledge. We've talked a little bit about that. Trust yourself to respond in meaningful ways and create joy in your conversations. If this last one doesn't happen, then I'm kind of like, what's the point, right? All right, let's keep going. It's 4:08. All right, so I know I kind of advertised this little class as like, let's see what it looks like and how it sounds. One thing that I thought was really great and why I chose this book to share with you guys today is that they provide a map of the process. Now, I put this mall map versus GPS. So think to yourself for just a minute. When you go into the mall or you go into a museum, you don't have GPS to tell you turn by turn where to go. You have like the mall map, for example, shows you where you are, and you can look and find multiple ways to get to where you want to go. Versus GPS, whatever you call your lady or your man that talks to you. We call her Betty in my car, but whenever she talks to us and she tells us exactly where to go. And my husband does not prefer GPS. He will look at the map and go, okay, I think I know how I'm going to get there. I, on the other hand, in the car, I need Betty to tell me every single turn I need to make. But conferring isn't like that. Conferring, I can't give you a turn by turn on how to confer with your kids. It is going to be much more of a map that you kind of have to navigate your way through. So this is what the map that Yates and Nozek have come up with, and they really revolve around these two questions. First, you've got to know your reader, what's going on, and then you're going to nurture and think about how might you respond. So once you know them, you have to respond. We're going to look a little further into each of these things. They have what they call moves, and they have what they call directions, and so we're going to look a little deeper into that. So first, they talk about interactive moves for conferring, and so I've highlighted each of those. Wondering, so I start my conversation or my conference with my reader by wondering about them, asking questions. This is that listening heavy part of our conversation. Once I've kind of wondered, and we're going to talk about these 4 things underneath here, I'm going to choose an action or a direction to go. And then the next move, I'm either going to affirm, extend, I'm almost always going to remind, and then I'm going to take note. Sorry, I think this is going to take the pointer off. Well, there we go. All right, so you have moves, and then you have directions. You have intentional, actually they use the word intentional directions. Come on. My clicker's not working, sorry. There it is. Well, okay, so you can see in the wonder phase, so my first move is to wonder. I've got to wonder about the book choice, healthy habits, strategic process, or authentic response. I like that they've kind of grouped. These are basically 4 areas that I might ask a student questions. I might pull up alongside and say, tell me about what kind of book you're reading today. I'm wondering what made you make that choice. I'm wondering why have you, or I noticed that you've been reading lots of literary fiction. Talk to me about why you choose that, so it's all about wondering about book choice. Sometimes I might pull alongside and ask questions more around their habits, around their process. This is where a lot of us tend to hang out, whether it's those skills and strategies. A lot of our learner tracking tools for setting goals are centered around this rather than some of these others, and it's important to have balance in all of those. And then again, how do they respond to text? I don't have all the question stems to share with you about this, but I think you could easily think about a question for each of these. So that's what I'm going to ask you to do real quick. Why don't, book choice is easy. Type in one question you might pull up and ask a student if you were wondering about their habits. And those would be, easiest way to think about that is the things they do as readers. I'm gonna leave it open to you to process that. What kind of question might you ask about their strategic processes or skills or behaviors as readers? And what might you ask if you were thinking about how they respond to reading? So type in just one question for any of those 4 habits, or any of those 4 directions, I'm sorry. Trying to watch time. What might you ask? I'm going to give everybody a minute to get something typed in. Good. Okay, so keep typing if you're typing or talking. I'm going to go ahead and pull out a couple of these. So when we think about the question, how do you use pictures to support your reading? So talk to me. I can't remember which campus that one's coming from, because I know it's got a teacher's name and I'm not connecting it right now in my brain to a campus. But where would that fall? Is that asking about book choice, habits, strategic process? What are you kind of addressing when you ask about picture support for reading?
That was me, Rocio at
Yeah.
Seaburn, and that will be more of the strategic process.
Definitely.
And so the healthy habits, I'm having a hard time figuring out what to ask. So I will definitely want to look into that book and see prompts. But it will be more like, are you enjoying this book? Are you reading this for enjoyment or to learn? And
for sure. For sure. I think I love, and I'm not picking on you by any means by choosing your particular question, but it's sticks with me because I've also been reading another book about who's doing the work. And I noticed that I, as a teacher, a lot of times I do the work for kids, and I so would ask that question, how do you use pictures? In that particular instance, I'm actually already naming for the kid the strategy as opposed to asking what strategies do you use? So I might, instead of ask, when you're stuck, what do you do? And then if they can't give me much, then I might say, well, what do you do with, what do you look at when you're stuck? And so I'm going to continue to scaffold. And if they just can't get there, then I'm going to go to your question, how do you use the pictures when you're stuck? Or just
I'm also trying to improve in asking, why did you make a mistake here? And having them tell me, oh, I'm not looking at the initial sound, or I didn't use the picture. Will that be more of a healthy habit instead of?
I think it's both. I don't think it would classify as either. I mean, I could think of reasons to put it in either one, but noticing whether and balancing whether we're asking more questions about our readers about both of those areas. Those both kind of have to do with skills and behaviors as readers versus asking about their choices or asking about, what did this, after you read, I don't even know. I'm thinking, a lot of the Rigby books, if you have Rigby stuff on your campus, there's one about lots of stories about the bears. And I know there's one about Baby Bear going fishing. After reading about Baby Bear going fishing, what does it make you think of? Whether it's connections or, does it prompt the student to want to share this book with somebody else? Any of those kind of things have to do with response. And we're going to learn a lot more about authentic response as we dive into next year because we've got, yay, a new strand of teak specifically to that. All right, I'm going to keep us moving here. I love lots of the types of questions that you're asking. But the conference with their kind of model and a strong way to start would be always just sitting up next to that kid to figure out what's going on. And that's going to happen through questioning and listening. All right, let's keep moving then. So you would then, I'm going to go back just a little bit. So once you've, go back screen. Come on. All right, I'm going to keep it on this one. So once you've wondered and asked questions, that's going to help you make that choice to either affirm something they're doing, extend or challenge them some way. And then once you've done one of those, you're going to remind them of your discussion, take some notes of your own, and then leave. Okay. We're not going to dig really deeply. I can already tell by our time we're not going to get as far as I had hoped, but I would like for you to watch one. So everybody who has a phone in the room, because I can't play a video through here to where you can listen. Goodness gracious, why is this not working? There we go. So I've got a QR code here. So with your phone, this is about a 5-ish minute video. If you will scan this with your phone, you can each do it with your own phone and then go watch it to the side. But you actually get a chance to watch one of the authors confer with a little girl named Nora. So I'm going to sit quiet. I'm going to set my timer for about 5 minutes, and then I will check back in with you after you get a chance to kind of watch their process in action. Hopefully it's working. It should look like this. I just can't play it from mine because you won't hear it. You will only see it. And I'm just going to scan. I hate to keep interrupting. Wave at me if you're able to watch it. Okay, thank you. Yes, I will put the QR code up. Sorry. That is totally my bad. There you go. All right, if you've finished watching, if you'll go ahead and respond in the chat, something that you noticed about what the teacher did or what the student did that just stood out to you. Just kind of an open response of your thoughts. Mm-hmm. Oh, my eye's twitching. I don't know why. All right, if you have not quite finished watching, you may want to go ahead and stop. We're going to go ahead and keep moving forward so that I can clock us out by 4:30. Thank you for your thoughts and feedback. Yes, you can definitely feel the excitement. I think that's huge. I tried my best to find you a conference to watch that was close to the actual age of students you have. This, if you do purchase the book, and I'll give you all the information if your campus would like to get it or you would like to, there is a link to their webpage where there are videos of each of the process or each of the moves that they talk about. The book dives way deeper. We literally could probably do a Zoom session on each of the moves and talk about each of those specifically, but all of the templates and the appendices, you can see what she's using here. All of that is available in the book and from their website, just to let you know. But I can't, the QR only takes you to this one video because I didn't want to share the website because it's copyrighted through the book. So if I am thinking, though, if you ever wanted to do something particular on your campus, like your team or something wanted to do some more learning and digging into this deeper, I would be glad to come out and share the book with you, or you could check it out from me. There's also that route if you would like to. So, all right, we're going to keep moving, like I said, so I can get us out of here on time. Okay, so that gave you a chance just to kind of see what their process is like. I'm going to go through these next few slides really quickly because what I've done is take just a snapshot of a chart where they have a description and an icon of each of the moves in their conference process. So, of course, first is wonder. We've already talked a little bit about that. In this chart, it'll talk to, this purpose is the know part of your reader. And then here are some questions to ask. You will have access to this slideshow when we're done. I had to pull this quote out off of this page. It said, the success of the Wonder Move hinges largely on learning to ask worthy exploratory questions. Some of you mentioned that when you watched her. You're not there to quiz kids on the contents of their books. You're there to find ways to help them thrive as readers. Isn't it easy for us to sit in and go, so tell me what the character did, or tell me, tell me about how the character's feeling. I'm not saying there's not going to be times for that, especially as we move into more of a reading workshop model and you have many lessons around comprehension strategies. There's going to be times where your conferences are more directed to seeing how your students are dealing with specific strategies that you've taught. But really, majority of your conversation should be about the kid as a reader rather than about the book. All right, let's keep going. Again, you choose, once you've thought and wondered, you're going to kind of choose a direction of what you're going to focus your conversation on. Then you may choose to affirm or extend. If you saw in the video, she actually affirmed before they got started and then chose to help extend something that she needed to work on. There again is kind of the purpose. This is how we're going to nurture our reader, by affirming something they're doing or helping to extend. Here are some questions that'll help you think through that. Lastly, you're going to remind, again, you're nurturing the reader and kind of helping what you've taught to stick to them. That's why that lovely picture. And then I added this part about, well, this is their note, but it was in a different section. You definitely want to be taking note of what's going on in your conference. All right, moving right along. So, lastly, before all this conferring happens, conferencing is not something that you just kind of step into and get it done. I think that's where a lot of us fail, both in writing conferences and reading conferences, is that we think that, oh, I'm going to give my mini lesson, I'm going to send them off, and then I can just go sit with whoever, and we can just talk about whatever. There is some intentionality and some planning that should happen. They call it behind the scenes action. So you're taking notes, you're going to gather, and you're going to make a plan for your conferencing. Whether this is you plan for the week or you plan day by day, there should be some kind of plan. First, they mentioned gathering. You want to have all your materials ready, just like guided reading, just like writing workshop. Ask yourself, what do you need? What will you carry with you as you go to confer? How are you going to take notes? Is it digital? Is it on paper? Is it a paper that's going to go to somewhere? I know a lot of you, this is something that you've already got in place, but it's really important to think about. Next, you want to think about making your plan. Good questions to ask yourself. Who will I decide to meet with? How often will I return to meet with them? There needs to be a plan. I am not a planner by nature, and we've talked about this in several of our Zoom sessions. I think everything falls apart. Without a plan, it just falls apart. There's a quote I'm trying to think of, and it's not coming to me right now. But you need to be strategic. Otherwise, you're going to hit and miss, or you're going to always go to those friends who are struggling and not hit your friends who actually are kind of on or above grade level. This is a great process and practice for them as well. All right, my buzzer's going off because it's so close to 4:30. So I will add this video and this slideshow so that you can go back and see all of the notes and all of these pieces. You'll have access to those. There we go. in the Google Plus community. Give me a day or so to get it in there because it takes a while to render the video and I want to put them in together. If you're having trouble, I get a lot of questions about you can't view things when you go to the Google Plus community. Make sure you're going through your MISD Google account. And if you're still having trouble, email me or send me a message because it could be the way I uploaded it or a permission that I forgot to change. You don't hurt my feelings at all if you ask me about that. I would love, like I said, if you get a few weeks into this and you're trying some conferring, please highlight and share with us what you're trying, what's going well, what did you try and it didn't work. I'm really trying to use that Google Plus community as a place for us to collaborate more and more. Hopefully, maybe you've seen in the white space, I've added some Google Plus challenges. A few of you have shared some of your writers. It's a great place to share there too. Here is the name of the book and, sorry, the publisher. Well, the publisher is Stenhouse. It was written in 2018, so it's a really recent resource. You also will find a picture of it on the very first slide. All right, that's it for today. It's 4:30, so I'm not even going to ask you guys for questions and comments. If you have any questions, feel free to hang out afterwards and type them into the chat. I'll be glad to respond there. But other than that, we're done for today. Thank you for joining us. Happy conferring.